Have you ever noticed that every pair of jeans has a tiny pocket inside the front pocket? It's too small for a phone, too awkward for your wallet, too narrow to be genuinely useful. Yet almost every pair of jeans still has one. Why? Why would manufacturers spend more than 150 years adding a pocket that most people barely use? The answer isn't fashion. It isn't decoration. And it certainly wasn't an accident. That little pocket was built for something, and once you discover why, you'll never look at your jeans the same way again. To understand why that tiny pocket is still there, we have to go back to the birth of blue jeans. To understand the tiny pocket, you first have to understand the people who wore the jeans. In the middle of the 19th century, America was expanding westward. Gold had been discovered in California. Railroads stretched across the country. Mining camps, ranches, construction sites, and frontier towns were growing at remarkable speed. It was hard work, the kind that quickly destroyed ordinary clothing. Workers spent long days digging, lifting, climbing, and riding on horseback. Pockets tore, fabric wore through. A good pair of trousers rarely stayed good for long. What people needed was something built to survive. One man helping supply that demand was Levi Strauss, a merchant who sold durable fabrics to workers across the American West. Among those fabrics was a tough cotton denim, strong enough to withstand work that lighter cloth simply couldn't. Then a tailor named Jacob Davis came up with an idea that changed workwear forever. The weakest parts of a pair of trousers were usually the pocket corners. So instead of stitching them alone, he reinforced those stress points with small copper rivets. The result was remarkably durable. In 1873, Davis and Strauss patented the design together. The blue jean, as we know it today, was born. Nothing about it was accidental. Every detail existed for a reason. These weren't clothes designed for fashion. They were tools made to help miners, railroad workers, cowboys, farmers, and laborers get through another day's work. One tiny pocket that looked almost too small to be useful, but its size was exactly what made it valuable. So, what was the tiny pocket actually made for? The answer was time itself. Long before wristwatches, the most reliable way to carry time was inside your pocket. Pocket watches had been around for centuries. By the late 19th century, they had become increasingly common among businessmen, railroad workers, craftsmen, and many working men who depended on keeping accurate time. But there was a problem. A pocket watch wasn't just another object you could toss into a pocket. It was a precision instrument. Inside its metal case, dozens of tiny gears, springs, and delicate moving parts worked together with remarkable accuracy. They were expensive, fragile, and far too valuable to leave rattling around beside coins, keys, or tools. A cracked crystal, a bent hand, or a damaged mechanism could leave its owner without the one thing they depended on every day. So the watch needed a pocket of its own, small enough to stop it from shifting around, deep enough to keep it secure while its chain remained attached to a waistcoat or belt. That tiny pocket was designed almost perfectly for the job. It held the watch firmly in place, protected it from heavier objects, and made it easy to pull out whenever the time was needed. It wasn't an extra pocket. It was the watch pocket. In fact, early Levi's advertisements and catalogs referred to it by exactly that name. For years, the design worked exactly as intended. But history has a habit of changing even the most practical inventions. And soon, the pocket watch itself. For decades, the watch pocket did exactly what it had been designed to do. It protected one of the most valuable things a person carried each day. Then, the world went to war. When the First World War began in 1914, soldiers faced a problem that pocket watches couldn't solve. On the battlefield, every second mattered. A soldier couldn't afford to stop, reach into a pocket, open a watch, and check the time. His hands needed to stay free, so more and more soldiers began wearing their watches on their wrists. At first, many were simply ordinary pocket watches fitted with leather straps. But the idea proved remarkably practical. A quick glance was all it took. No fumbling, no stopping, No taking a hand off a rifle or a piece of equipment. By the end of the war, millions of men had grown accustomed to wearing wristwatches every day. When they returned home, they didn't go back to pocket watches. Manufacturers quickly recognized the change. Wristwatches became smaller, more reliable, and increasingly affordable. What had once been a military convenience soon became an everyday habit. Over the following decades, the pocket watch slowly faded from daily life. The object the tiny pocket had been built to protect was disappearing. Yet something unexpected happened. The pocket didn't disappear with it. Even as watches moved from pockets to wrists, that little piece of denim remained exactly where it had always been, stitched into millions of pairs of jeans, still surviving, long after its original purpose had quietly come to an end. But if almost nobody was using it for watches anymore, why did manufacturers keep making it? By the middle of the 20th century, the little watch pocket had lost the job it had been created to do. Pocket watches had largely disappeared from everyday life. If practicality alone had determined its future, the tiny pocket should have disappeared too. But something unexpected had happened. Blue jeans were no longer just work clothes. They had become something much bigger. What began on mines, railroads, and ranches had spread into cities. Factory workers wore them. Teenagers embraced them. Hollywood helped to turn them into a symbol of independence. Then came musicians, motorcyclists, and an entirely new generation who wore jeans, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. As jeans became more popular, their design became familiar. People expected the heavy denim, the copper rivets, the contrast stitching, and 5 pockets. Together, those details formed the silhouette people instantly recognized. Removing one of them would make the jeans feel subtly different. Not necessarily worse, just less like the jeans people had come to know. Manufacturers understood this. So, even as the watch pocket lost its original purpose, they kept sewing it into every new pair. What had started as a practical solution had become part of the blueprint. A feature designed for function had quietly become a tradition. Once the pocket watch disappeared, the tiny pocket faced a choice: become obsolete or become useful, all over again. No company announced a new purpose for it. People simply invented their own. One person slipped a few coins inside, another carried matches, someone tucked away a train ticket, a wedding ring, or a guitar pick before stepping onto a stage. For decades, the little pocket quietly adapted to whatever its owner needed. Then the world became digital. USB flash drives found a home there. Wireless earbuds fit almost perfectly. Even today, many people still use it for small items they don't want disappearing into a larger pocket. The object changed, the pocket remained, and perhaps that's why it survived for so long. It was never locked to a single purpose. Each generation inherited the same small piece of denim, then gave it a new job. Without anyone planning it, the watch pocket became one of the most adaptable features ever stitched into a pair of jeans. What began as protection for a delicate timepiece slowly transformed into a place for whatever people valued most. Very few parts of our everyday clothing have managed to evolve in quite the same way, and that's what makes this tiny pocket so remarkable.